where two sisters and an occasional guest try to develop and pitch a board game concept in under an hour. I'm Miriam.
I'm Georgia.
And we are joined by my friend and erstwhile colleague, Marc.
Hi.
Say hi, Marc.
Hey.
Would you mind telling the listener a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, as Miriam said, we are former colleagues and friends. I work at Thirsty Meeple's Board Game Cafe, where I primarily spend my time learning and teaching new games to customers and playing them probably more than I should with friends on shift.
I'm so happy to hear that that's the case, because as far as I was aware, you do that very little of the time and are usually stuck behind the bar.
Well, I try to put a positive spin.
Marc, a very good friend, very cool guy, probably the most overqualified guest we've had.
I thought you were going to say he's the most cool guy we've had on the podcast, which just be absolutely savage.
I mean, to be fair, we've only had one guy on the podcast so far.
Yeah, it's been mainly a gal's affair, but
That's
even
not
gals can be cool guys.
It's true.
Cool guy is gender neutral.
As always, our guest has brought our prompt this week. Marc, what was the prompt that you brought for us?
So the prompt I brought was survival.
And are there any particular games, or are there any particular ideas that you associate with this, or something you thought would be fun to explore?
So there's two games that I love that are kind of survival based. So the first is Subterra. Very nice little cooperative experience of cave diving, surviving all the difficulties that one might encounter in that, as well as an unknown abomination that's hunting you down and your friends. And then the other one is Friday by Friedman Freeze, which is a little solo game where you are trapped on a desert island and have to survive by finding resources to feed yourself and fend off pirate attacks.
Okay. I know one of those games. I don't think I've ever seen or played Friday, but sounds pretty cool.
I am not aware of either of those games. The survival game that I thought might get name checked would be Dead of Winter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Diamant, which is, as party games go, really ace, kind of like push your luck survival game, where it's sort of survival but by rounds. So it's like an elimination game, but you're eliminated within that round, you still get to go on to another round.
So elimination was an idea that I was throwing around while I was thinking about this theme, and I was thinking particularly about how do you make a game that involves elimination but is still fun, which is obviously perfectly achievable. But this was inspired by playing Junk Art at the weekend, a game that we absolutely love and that we name check all the time on the pod, but that so many of the rounds either end the first time someone drops out, or people are eliminated one by one. And if you're out, how do you have fun if people are still playing? So that was something I was thinking about in relation to survival and elimination. The other thought that I had to do with survival was another thing that I absolutely love in gaming, and we have done something to do with it before, which is like social deduction. Your your werewolves, your Among Us is, that kind of, those games often include an element of sort of surviving from round to round.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had the same thought, and I think that a lot of my ideas kind of follow along the same kind of lines. Like you can imagine a survival-based co-op game. There's one called The Lost Expedition, which is very strongly survival themed in the sense that you're literally like it's all about managing your resources by deciding how to like confront every challenge that you face. I was thinking about like with more survival stuff, less game stuff. You know that idea of the rule of three, where you can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Like whether it would be fun to do some kind of game based on that.
Sounds.
I do like that.
Yeah,
when I was
that sparked something for me, although I don't know exactly what. But when you said that, it made me think. Yes.
while I was looking up the rule of three, I landed on a website called truepreppers.com, and that also made me think about the sort of nature of prepping, where you're prepping for some kind of like uncertain future event that you don't necessarily know like when will arrive or what its nature will be.
Yeah, so it would be possible to be a really good prepper, but then just prep for the wrong thing. Like how I mean, I don't watch a lot of this stuff, but like a lot of extreme preppers in America have like hundreds of guns, but not very much soup.
Yeah, if they're the soup-based apocalypse, they're the first ones to go.
Well, exactly. If there's a soup shortage, they're in big trouble. So I kind of wanted to ask you guys a question about this theme, which is that I feel like survival, if we're doing like a game that's sort of literally about survival rather than a game where like it's more abstract, but the objective is to survive to the end and win. I feel like survival goes in two directions. There's either kind of a more real life version of it, which I would think of as like, in video game terms, it's kind of like Minecraft or something like that. Like you have to get the things you need to survive. Yeah. And then there's survival horror, where something scary wants to get you. I guess Minecraft has a bit of that as well. Do we have any opinions on if we're using survival as a theme? Do we want to do something that's more horror-esque, or something that it may be sort of inspired by this rule of three, is a bit more about like real ideas of survival, the sort of reality of survival?
So I had a little ponder on this. Are you guys aware of the video game The Forest?
I am not.
No.
Okay, so that's kind of a blend of both. And it's a case of like, yeah, you've crash landed on this island. To start with, you are having to survive, and then you start to uncover all these weird mysteries, and then find this horrible mutated cannibal cult sort of thing, which are not fun times. But you still have to keep doing that whole sort of survival thing of, okay, yeah, I'm now fighting off these cultists. I've run out of water and food, and I'm going to die very quickly now.
Okay.
I kind of like that sort of, I don't know, that sort of exploration of, okay, this is a bad situation. Start to get a little bit more comfortable, and then suddenly, oh, it gets worse.
Yeah. I've only played it once, but I feel like Dead of Winter does that a little bit as well, right? Yeah. Like there's a kind of a horror survival situation you're in, but actually a lot of the survival problems that you have to solve don't have anything to do with the kind of external threat. They're problems that come from inside the situation that you're in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I would be kind of interested in making a game that has a survival theme and that maybe sort of blends a horror element. If we're going to do that, if we're going to make a horror game, I think it would be interesting to talk about like some boundaries that we would want to put in place for horror, and also maybe some areas of horror that we want to explore, like things that we're afraid of. So we've made a couple of horror games on the podcast before that have gone right into my greatest fear, which is doppelgangers. So yeah, like I don't know if anyone wants to put any hard limits on anything horror wise to start off with.
Well, I have to say that the game Mark mentioned, Subterra, does quite a nice job of like blending the kind of survival and horror things. And what it does quite nicely for me is that there's no real depiction of the like nasties that are after you particularly. You kind of just imagine them, but what makes them scary is the way they behave according to the game. They kind of like they can appear and they like go after the like player who's nearest them. And I think it's a very effective like scary game because of that.
Yeah, this is true in horror films, right? Like it's scarier when you don't see the monster.
Yeah, that fear of the unknown is always so much worse than what it actually could be.
But yeah, I'm not sure that I have necessarily boundaries in terms of like what's scary for me.
Well, I feel like anything that I would consider a boundary just wouldn't come up. I think it's fair to say I don't think any of us would pitch a game that kind of crossed what I thought was an unacceptable line in terms of what's scary. I guess I could kind of like boil it down to, and this is something I talk about with horror movies because I have watched a fair few horror movies, but I'm still quite a scaredy cat. I like it when something is spooky. I don't like it when it's based in reality. A monster is fine. A person who wants to harm you is bad. Like, because that really happens in real life to real people.
Yeah.
So I'd rather keep it more on the kind of like monstery side of things, I guess, rather than I don't think any of us would pitch like, oh, a killer wants to get you.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, G, I just want to ask, timer, should we start the timer?
Oh yeah, I think we probably should start the timer. Have you got one ready to go?
I don't, but I can do it quickly.
Nice. Every episode. Every episode we forget that our 1 hour podcast needs a timer.
And we're off.
Is there anything in the kind of survival space that we think has not been explored a lot? So something I think is fairly overdone is like zombies. In the video game space, like, you know, you sort of wake up with nothing and punch a tree. People have done quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we think could be fun to like venture into?
So one thing that I quite like that I think has never really been done quite as well since it was first came out was like the Predator. So like that invisible smart enemy that's just like tracking you, watching you, learning about you. Like, you know, it could be something that, you know, like you have like a basic AI design for the monster, and it could be like, the monster has raided your camp and has taken some of your food, but has also, you know, looked through your clothes or something, you know, something weird like that. Like it's this thing that is trying to learn about you so it can hunt better or something like that.
So this could be a really interesting challenge for us to take on in the pod. We've done a couple of things where there is what I would call a basic AI element, where you're playing against an automated deck or some randomized dice rolls. It'd be cool to do a game that modeled that quite like in a bit more depth. I think that could be really interesting, and that would make a bit of a like a USP of the game for me, maybe, like to have an interesting automated opponent. Are we seeing do we have any thoughts on like, is this cooperative? Is it solo? Is it multiplayer competitive, where you don't have to win, you just don't want to lose, kind of thing?
I'm not sure about competitive. I don't know. Depending on what our sort of narrative is, but that doesn't feel like it quite fits for me.
Yeah, I mean, I initially had a thought of like a competitive with like a cooperative element, maybe. So that like, you could be out trying to survive and you bump into another survivor gathering resources. You could team up to get, make more effective use of something. But like, I know, like there was one overall goal of like trying to build like a giant signal fire or something so that you are the one that is rescued. So you have to do that whole playing off of, do I want to ally with this person and, get better things for myself, but also potentially help them, and they escape and I'm stuck here.
It could work in an element of social deduction on top of sort of everything else,
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to throw too much in, because I do tend to run away with my thoughts. We could have 8 different game mechanics in one.
We do tend to find that on the video episodes we get a lot more out there than there's something about having a screen share and something to talk about that really works on that front. So I was just thinking, sorry, like, you guys know a lot more board games than me. I've played a fair few, but I've never been even adjacent to the industry. I was just thinking about like, what is invisible and intelligent and scary and stalks you around? Has anyone really done like, are there many vampire games? Are there many like Dracula games?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about like like digital like
oh, okay.
you were going to talk about like
like Amazon. Where you have to escape your own Alexa. No, I'm on board. That's way better.
I mean, I know that there are some vampire games, but the main one I'm aware of is very much more you're after Dracula than he's after you.
Yeah, I've played that one, I think. Is it played like across a sort of map of Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's quite an like sort of old-fashioned in looks, but also like a little bit of an old-fashioned type of game. I seem to recall, like a little complicated.
Well, what if we've got some kind of digital vampire?
Digital vampire. Okay,
it's in your
this
phone.
Is it. It's the core idea.
It's in your phone. It wants to suck your binary blood.
It wants to steal your identity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Identity fraud via digital vampire. That's a thing I never thought I would see on my screen, by the way. Digital vampire, ?
Digital vampire, interrobang. The thing I was sort of wondering to myself when we were talking a bit about mechanics was whether we would be playing a game that has a map, which or just like in general, what kind of mechanics would we be looking at? Because I'm interested in like how we can make a survival game like with a mechanic that feels not too like busy, I guess. Like I definitely like when I think about Dead of Winter and things like that, and there's like a big map and lots of moving around. I've never played it, but it just feels like there's a bit much going on. But
oh no, yeah, absolutely, there's a ton going on.
And I think the same's true of Friday, right?
No, Friday's just a deck of cards.
Oh, okay. I must be thinking of something else. Is there like
thinking of Robinson Crusoe?
That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Robinson Crusoe.
You understand my confusion.
Yeah, Friday is pocket-sized Robinson Crusoe for one player.
Okay. So I think
Um,
Miriam's made a really good point there. Like, if we were going to, it sounds like Friday does this quite effectively. So, Mark, you might be able to give some really good insight on this. But if you were going to make a survival game as simple or as elegant as possible, what is the big idea? What makes a game of survival work? What thing or things do you do?
so for me, one thing I think that makes those games work so well is kind of the randomness. So like Friday is just deck of cards, Subterra, it's flipping over those tiles. Um, I had thought of something like uh, where you like have different sets of tiles, for example, and you build, I don't know, let's say an island out of these tiles. Like you build the board. You have a
Like
starting point,
the
and
Forbidden
then
Games or whatever.
hmm?
Like in the Forbidden Games.
Yeah, a little bit sort of like that. And then like as you are progressing, let's say, you could have each character has a set amount of movement, and they can flip over a tile, and it might present them with like two options for like trying to gather resources. So, you could get some berries from a bush, which is going to, not take a great deal of energy, but it's not going to provide you with a great deal of food. Or you can try and spend a bit more energy to try and, I don't know, catch a rabbit or something. That sort of unknown and that sort of pushing your luck of, all right, do I want to keep exploring further in where things might get more difficult? Or do I just want to try and survive and hoard what I've got and play it safe, but maybe not win, sort of thing?
Yeah. To
That's
tie
sort of,
that into we don't have to go with the digital vampire theme, but it kind of made me think that like an interesting take on that would be if you're asking yourself the question like in those kind of like games or reality shows you sometimes see on TV where like so you're being hunted or what have you, and sometimes the person needs to ask themselves the questions like, do I like turn my data on so I can do X, Y, or Z, but that might make me easier to track. Do I use my phone? We could be
I love that.
like,
yeah.
if there's a vampire in your phone, how often do you use your phone for the like utility it provides you versus do you just keep it off? And I guess we could have some sort of deck or some other like random element that represents a resource which also can like bite you back.
Yes. So it's phone use as a resource. So whereas in the example that Mark was giving before, where you're on an island and you're deciding whether to risk the energy that you have to get more food, which would presumably kind of get you more energy. On this case, it's kind of like, I guess you're sort of, the basic idea would be something like you flip a card and you're presented with a scenario which might let you gain something which would increase your likelihood of defeating this vampire in some way. But in order to do it, you have the option to either like use your sat nav or try and use a map. And like, you're a digital native, so you don't know how to read a map. So your chances of success are lower if you use the map. But if you turn on your phone, then you're going to like expose yourself to risk. And maybe there's some way of modeling the risk.
Yeah, like
Yeah. I like that.
I guess a simple sort of model of that comes to mind is the kind of like trackers in the Forbidden Games where the higher it goes, the more cards you're turning over, the more event cards you're turning over, and that like those things are bad.
Yeah, or like the haunt mechanic in Betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
I was imagining something where like the risk of something was indicated by a number of coin flips you had to make, where you had to get a certain number of outcomes, and if you so that would represent like the difficulty of it. So, you know, you have a 50-50 chance of making one coin flip, and then it's 25% to make two coin flips, and so on.
I love that, because like you can tie that into binary. That is just binary, and it's just, yeah, you just, I don't know, tapping away on your phone trying to avoid being tracked by the digital vampire.
And then maybe there would be things that you could do that would like increase your chances of making good coin flips. Like you could gain a resource that lets you reflip a coin or ignore a result or something.
Yeah.
So then, but you would have to take a risk to get that or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we sort of imagine our kind of scenario being, and our win condition, and what does the vampire need to do to take away the win condition?
I think
these are all three big questions, but
I do think we are skipping over the most important part, though. What is the vampire's name?
My immediate answer is Nosferatu, where there's a 4 and a 2, but that has been done.
Oh my god, I love it. I do love that, though. That is absolute perfection.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure there's a horror film called that, but
I mean, I need to watch that now if there is.
I'm sure we can come up with something along those lines. So my immediate feeling is that because this is a game that is about grappling with your phone, I feel like this is a solo game.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Like, I don't know, it's something that's like,
it's feeling more solo than anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's something kind of allegorical about it, I think. Like,
oh no, absolutely.
Like all of us, well, Miriam obviously isn't like a full-time smartphone owner, but those of us who are full-time smartphone owners probably spend a lot of time grappling with how much of our life force it actually does suck up, and you know, like how many of our sort of happy and productive hours we lose to the vampire that lives in our phone.
Yeah, you're right. It's totally thematic.
I said, should we make this very political and be like, the end goal is to, you know, go outside and look at a tree?
To touch grass, the game.
Yeah, don't like it. The graphics are not good, as good.
So yeah, it's something about, like, the premise is kind of that you come to realize that your phone is intentionally sucking your energy. I guess you wake up one day and it's like it's like plugged into you and draining your battery.
Cool. Gross.
Yeah, the image for that is
yeah, it's really nasty.
Yeah, we'll have to find a very talented artist for this who has no ethics.
Most talented artists have no ethics. So there's sort of like, there's your own energy. There's sort of like the battery of your phone, and then there's this kind of like risk idea to do with actually, you know, turning on your phone or using your data, you know, that it exposes you to risk. So I feel like one possible way of doing it would be to have kind of a life meter represented by a score, you know, that you start with a certain amount of life and you can lose and gain it.
What about instead of life, what about like sanity?
Oh, okay.
Because that's like, a penalty card is like, oh, your friend has posted 5 pictures of her new baby and you spend an hour scrolling Facebook. You know, maybe not quite as satirical as that. But...
No, but I mean, there is something there as well in the way that, you know, like doing a nice thing, like saying to your friend, congratulations on the cute baby, exposing you to this risk that
Yeah.
you might kind of get trapped. There is kind of something there to do with. I'm not entirely sure that I love sanity as the exact wording for it. I feel like it
Yeah.
vaguely blurs a line that we try and avoid, but I like it as the kind of the concept. It's like kind of your grip on your sense of self. Like,
Yeah, like your individualism as opposed
yeah,
to part of the
personality or
network.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, hmm. So I think in terms of mechanics for the game, I quite like the idea, or at least of just as a starting point, if it was just a deck of cards, kind of what would that look like? I've not played Friday, but like the Cartaventura games, that's kind of like everything happens in order and you're just making decisions, a bit like a sort of choose your own adventure style thing.
Yeah, Deck Detectives, those games are a bit like that.
Yeah, so like with Friday, you have like I can't remember exactly what it's called. You have like a small deck of cards which kind of represent your general well-being, your sort of nourishment level and stuff like that. And each time you fail to do something which is based on drawing more cards, that sort of push your luck sort of thing, you remove cards from that deck and it gradually shows you getting weaker and weaker. And then you have these event decks, and if you progress through all of one, you've like survived 1 week until Friday. And then you get onto a harder, slightly larger deck, and stuff like that. But there are things in those that you can get that help protect you, help replenish your nourishment, that sort of thing.
Okay. So I've just been like vaguely drawing decks of cards without really thinking too much. So yeah, I thought like the idea of an event deck, I think, is quite firmly embedded in what we're talking about. There's this idea that you would turn over a card and you would be presented with a scenario, and the scenario would have like choices, the possibility to expend resources to gain different or better or more resources, or to make a move against the vampire that lives in your phone.
Yeah.
The other thing, because this was sort of inspired by Mark's idea earlier on that we would have like sort of an AI opponent, is whether there's a deck that actually represents the vampire a bit more, that lets it make a move against you. So, maybe sometimes you just turn over a bad card in the event deck and the vampire's kind of there,
Yeah.
blah.
Yeah, because it could be something like, like the narrative is, it's like a utopian future city or whatever, but you kind of wake up and realize that you're in like basically a grey cell, just getting up and going to work every day, and you're trying to like leave the city, get to see some trees, get to the country or whatever. And it could be like, yeah, you're going through, you're trying to avoid certain things, using your phone, trying to navigate your way. And then suddenly, yeah, the vampire like appears. So you draw from that, and it could be like, okay, the vampire appears on a monitor in like a shop window or something or other, and messes with like the traffic lights. So you have to be diverted, and it's like, all right, spend however many resources to get back on track, avoiding all the crashed cars or something like that.
I quite like that narratively. Yeah, I was imagining a much more like sort of microcosmic version of it, where it's just like you are. I mean, this sort of rings true as like somebody who's just moved to a new city. Like it could be like the beginning of the story is you just realize one day that you are sort of isolated and you have to try and like navigate your way to a more like real fulfilling existence and not allow yourself to get like sucked in by the the phone vampire, but I like that kind of like more sort of realized version of it.
Well, I feel like because I was imagining something more like what Miriam was describing, but I feel like there is this kind of allegorical, like you can sort of do something that blurs the boundaries a little bit more on that, where it's maybe, you know, it's possible for people to kind of read into it what they want to get out of it. So something that's of interest to me is, do we see the event deck as random, or is it ordered, more like a sort of an escape room or a detective game? And does the randomness kind of come in elsewhere? Because sort of, if we want to do something that's got a bit of a narrative where you're trying to move towards something, it could be that the event deck kind of has an order, but you and or the vampire might have the ability to kind of like discard events without having to play them.
You could potentially do something, you know, like what TV shows kind of do, where like the first couple of episodes are about the arc for the season, and then the last couple are like resolving the arc for the season, but everything in between is kind of like sort of filler sort of thing, or things that happen, things that
lower stakes.
Yeah, things that, you know, like build stuff up. You could do something like that where it's like, okay, you have these, you build the event deck like these 2 cards are on the bottom, take such and such from stack, whatever, shuffle them, then put these 2 on top. That is chapter 1 sort of thing.
Yeah. So you could start with like a sort of a selection of early game, a selection of middle game, and a section of end game cards. That would let you control how long your play experience was going to be as well. Like you could, just,
and how difficult you wanted it as well.
Yeah, I like that. So, this makes me wonder if maybe this is something like you've just described, where it's kind of got chapters and it's episodic, in which case are there kind of like changes to the self deck that would continue from chapter to chapter, kind of like
make it like a legacy evolution sort of thing.
Solo legacy. If we do a vampire thing for that, though, that is, we're infringing on 1,000-year-old vampire territory. But like, so it makes it more of a journey to kind of escape the vampire that lives in your phone.
Also, I like the thought though then that like as you gain things, the vampire could also grow in powers. Like you're taking it on this journey, it's absorbing more information, and itself would get more powerful as you could add new things into its deck as well.
That makes me feel like things could actually leave the self deck and get corrupted and go into the vampire deck.
Yeah.
Like there's like, and maybe the vampire could also gain, like, it's almost the sort of tug of war between like the self deck and the vampire deck, as kind of like, you know, one gets stronger and one, you'd have to balance it so that one of them didn't just like completely run away with it. But you know, as you get weaker, the vampire gets stronger, but then something happens from the event deck that kind of like changes the pull.
You definitely have to have some things that could potentially like take it the other way, just to give you.
I mean, it's sort of it's a question, because I can see a world where that could be quite closely tied into win and lose condition. Like in the world of like ordinary playing card games, there are games where it's just like you need to either lose all your cards or eliminate other people when they lose all their cards. But just the size of a deck in this scenario wouldn't, I feel like, at least based on the mechanics as I understand at the moment, wouldn't actually affect like how good the deck is.
Or it could actually negatively affect how good the deck is. It's like a solo against yourself deck builder. Well, you're against like an automated deck building machine that steals from you.
I guess we need to understand like what's on a card. Do cards themselves have like resources on that represent things? I
feel like there's lots of different types of card, but I haven't really conceived of any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be, like passive cards, things that sort of when draw. I mean, I'm thinking more of the self deck, of like, your observation skills or, or high or whatever. If you need to use such and such a thing, it's not as difficult. So there might need to be some sort of like energy or something to be able to use stuff. Besides from like resources which might give you a buff.
So you think there's some passive cards that would kind of like, as you confront event cards, that event card is easier because you have
like you might like lower the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we take that back to having to make the coin flips, you can have passive cards that say automatically count as one good coin flip, or a resource card that you can discard that counts as one good coin flip, or it has some other good use.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean. So like maybe it's great in one, like it lets you automatically succeed on a certain type of check, or it just counts as one good coin flip on another one. So like you are trying to acquire things that will make it easier for you to succeed in future. So that, when you need to flip 5 heads in a row, you can, increase your chances of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, you could have like action cards that like allow you to draw from the resource deck, or like potentially run away from a challenge to like come back to it later. One thing that's just popped into my head as well is, we were talking about the sort of legacy sort of thing. So I kind of like the idea of like these, especially the passive cards, the ones that I like would say, like let's say like boost you as a person. So it might be like your charisma, your sort of focus, your intelligence, that sort of thing. I love the thought of like, if they are gone into the vampire deck, let's say you lose the game, whatever, you start again. The next vampire that you go up against when you restart the game or whatever could have these cards. So it's like you are a new victim in this circle.
Yeah.
And the vampire's learning and growing.
Yeah, the vampires got stronger by defeating the previous iteration of you.
Yeah, or at least different. Like, you might remove some cards and not just end up with a ridiculously overpowered vampire, but it might require a different strategy to kind of beat it.
Yeah, but you would also have that information, so that kind of helps to balance it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, next time I'm up against a really smart vampire, so I'm gonna like, I don't know, I'm gonna try and spec
punch
being
through
really
everything.
dumb and strong. So what you could do then for, say, some of the resources or actions is also do kind of like a cost, so you can use it to guarantee flip, get a good flip, but maybe you also insert something into the vampire deck, or you also
or draw like from the vampire deck if you're having to use your phone for the thing.
Yeah, so like it's not like game over if you fail a flip, but maybe if you fail a flip, you turn over a card from the vampire deck and, they get to make a move against you or something like that.
Yeah.
So just to kind of like talk through, because I feel like I have a lot of ideas about like the sort of the pieces. I just want to talk through how I think play would proceed, and you guys just stop me the second I say something that doesn't match what you think we would be doing. So on a typical turn, I would first flip over a card from the event deck and be faced with some kind of challenge. The challenge is would have sort of a description of the action. It would have a thing I gain if I succeed. It would have a penalty that I would incur if I fail. And it would also have like a cost, like how many heads I would have to flip to succeed. So I am set my challenge. That's the first thing that happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing that I happen is I decide what course of action I'm going to take. So maybe there's two choices. One of them's easier but has like a lower positive, and one of them's harder. But it would gain me something really good. It would gain me a new resource or a new passive ability, a stat improvement, something like that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to know what we think stats do. So would there be different challenges that I'm supposed to solve with strength or intelligence, and how does that change how many good results I have to flip?
Yeah.
So
I think that with the coin flips,
I can't decide if the coin flips are unnecessary and should be replaced with dice rolls, or if I like the tension that comes from having to flip a coin a certain number of times.
I like the coin flips, but I think you probably can't have a higher difficulty than like 3 or 4, right? Because it rapidly becomes
like
very unlikely
odds.
to. Yeah,
but that's where I think the idea of having resources that you can spend or have your stats decrease it. So something could have a 5 flip difficulty, which would obviously be like vanishingly unlikely to do in real life. I mean, not vanishingly unlikely, like you can't, it's as likely as flipping any combination of 5 coins. But it's hard to do. But say you had your strength stat was high, so that takes 1 off, and then you also have 2 resources that you can use, so that takes 2 off, and suddenly you only have to flip 2 coins.
Yeah.
And the risk seems palatable.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea, which is why I think a card would have maybe like a low risk option and a high risk option, so that if you draw something early in the game, you can still get something out of it. But then as your character kind of like stats up and gets more resource, you have the opportunity to make riskier plays.
Yeah. So continuing with your turn description, do we think that there's like every turn a vampire like automatically gets to take an action, or does that only happen when we like receive a penalty kind of thing?
I'm in 2 minds about this. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. I feel like for it to really feel as if you're playing against a sort of automated opponent, I feel like the digital vampire should get a turn of its own, but maybe it gets to do an extra thing if you fail.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like a very basic sort of card sort of thing that could look kind of like a basic sort of like circuit board sort of thing with a very like a token on it, and could be a case of like the vampire will you'll draw a card or whatever, and this thing is going to progress towards you. It's going to progress up this circuit or whatever, making things less effective, maybe like your resources, or
it could reduce your stats.
Yeah,
like if it gets close enough to you.
Yeah, it could be like an infection, like a viral sort of thing, where it's like, okay, if you fail so many times, it's like each time you fail, you're going to move this token along these like nodes, and when it does that, boom, something no longer functions for you, sort of thing.
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
I really like that. So that like, again, it sort of adds difficulty. The way you described it as like a circuit board rather than a track as well kind of makes me think like it could be a bit branching. I'm not sure what would motivate like which way the vampire kind of chose to go, Maybe you could use the coin flip, if it only ever has two choices.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a case of that. So, like, looking at your sort of drawing, it could be a case of it goes to the next node that has the least amount of junctions. So it goes like the path of least resistance.
Makes sense.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe like you could try and get something that protects a node, so it like protects a particular app, so it like protects
so you
your
could
maps or something.
Sort of put a token on something, and that would prevent the vampire from getting that particular benefit. So if it would really screw with you for the vampire to reduce your intelligence by 1, you could gain something that would prevent that.
Yeah, like you install a firewall or something.
Yeah, I really like that. So, and I think that again makes it feel a bit more like you're playing against an automated opponent, and that there is some kind of, so the vampire gets its own turn where it does something, but then your penalty for failing isn't that it's game over. It's just that the vampire gets a bit stronger.
Yeah,
and maybe there are, far along the circuit board, there's some outcomes that would be really disastrous for you, like it gets to play 2 cards a turn, or but then this also creates the opportunity for you to do things that would let you play back against it. And as you've already identified, like maybe blocking off a node, but maybe you could also send it back, like defragment your phone, or like
run like a little bit of a purge
settings.
On it.
Dunk it in some holy water and then put it in some holy rice.
I think we would probably need I think like if the vampire gets to move on the circuit track every turn, then it would end up being quite a complex track.
So it definitely wouldn't be on every turn. I think it would just be if you failed a flip challenge.
Okay, right.
Yeah, or on particular cards. So I think it could be like, right, okay, you lose this resource or whatever, and then move it 2 spaces along the track or whatever, and you can see it getting closer to these nodes. Sort of thing.
We've got 20 minutes on the clock, just as a time update.
Okay, so I feel like I have a pretty clear idea of a lot of the core idea of the game. Now, what I feel is that I have a pretty good sense of how I lose.
Yeah.
But I am not entirely sure how I win.
What does losing look like, just in your...
So I think I had originally imagined that I would lose if I lost all my like hit points. But I think that I lose if the vampire just makes it all the way to a node that says, the vampire's got you.
Okay.
And I think that would be quite far away, but I also think it would be possible for things to snowball in such a way that once losing came an inevitability, it wouldn't take very long. You wouldn't have to just sort of like sort of sit there and drag it out, knowing that you probably aren't going to pull it back for 45 minutes, I think.
Okay, yeah.
So I feel like basically your goal is kind of to prevent the vampire by any means necessary from really like getting to the end of the circuit board where it says you lose. And you do that by boosting your stats, by winning flips. That's how I hold the vampire off. I just want to know how I beat him. Or her. Women can be anything these days.
Digital Vampire Slayers.
All them.
Yeah, Buffy 2024. I mean, for me, I see the way you win is getting through the event deck.
Okay, yeah.
Progressing through the story or whatever sort of thing in it.
Yeah.
And you can give yourself a longer or a more challenging game by stacking the event deck.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be good to have like we described at the start having like different decks that you kind of build your event deck from blind. And maybe you have like a special stack of end cards so that you only get one of those and it gets the end and
Yeah.
it kind of says like, you stab a wooden stake through your phone and you're finally free.
Yeah.
Something like that, like like you escape from wherever you're trying to escape from, or you rescue who you're trying to rescue from their digital servitude.
You throw your phone in the reservoir and yeah.
I like that this kind of has the capacity to be just as cyberpunk as you want to be. Like, it's like it's a relatively cyberpunk concept, but you can kind of lean back from that and be like, no, the vampire's a bit more of a metaphor, or you can lean into it and be like, the vampire is entirely real.
Yeah. But I love the idea that you've just decided to quit working at Amazon and you're trying to escape, just navigate the warehouse. And the vampire just has like a little Jeff Bezos face, and he's like, "No, go back to work."
The vampire is Alexa.
Yeah, just like I love the idea of like having like a silly deck of like just incredibly satirical cards, and then some that are like a little bit darker.
Yeah, I like that. Like, so we're sort of getting into brand and identity, sort of realm here. And I feel like you've really hit it there, that it's like silly and dark. Like, so graphically I was imagining something quite weirdly, the last solo game that we designed, I also pitched something with like ASCII art, so I guess that's not quite what I mean, but like something with kind of a relatively retro digital aesthetic. But maybe it would be better if it was like retro digital but only like 10 years, like kind of like that kind of skeuomorphic iPhone interface kind of feel to it.
I'm sort of imagining
with like buttons. And
I quite like the idea, and like you can disagree, but that like most of the deck and the illustrations would be very like simple kind of smartphone digital graphics and stuff. I think it would potentially be fun if like occasionally throughout the deck you had like way more detailed kind of horror style illustrations.
Yeah.
Like when you're reading I don't know, when you're, I guess I don't know what the example is that I want to give, but like when you're suddenly surprised by the kind of like graphic nature of the
kind of like a jump scare in a card game sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I also kind of have like this. Did I ever show you the deck builder Crave?
No.
Okay, so Crave is a very, very on the nose deck builder where it's vampires versus humans, vampire hunters, and it's very, very silly. So like all the vampires are goth and like punks, and all their names begin with a V. And like there's werewolves in it, and all the werewolves look like hipsters, and all their names begin with a W. And it's so incredibly silly. There's like the most terrifying image of like an ant, that's like all horrific, and he's called Ethan. And I kind of like that sort of like serious juxtaposition between like this is a giant murderous tree, but he's called Ethan. And yeah, just that kind of little bit of sort of silliness in there, like, here's your young hipster boss, but he does actually work for the vampire, and he's now murdering all your colleagues in a brutal fashion.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. That juxtaposition between sort of stuff.
I think that would be fun, like because it's like a game with random events that you could like suddenly turn over a card and it's like, oh, like a massacre scene or something.
Yeah. After you've been looking at silly apps all day, like, but that'd be kind of good though. That would fit with it of like, you are spending all the time looking at your phone, and then you suddenly look up and notice the horrors of the actual world that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that fits very thematically as well.
So I've kind of done some little doodles here, including a card back that I kind of thought was like kind of like the back of a classic iPhone, but I've just done like a drop of blood instead
Oh,
of where
okay.
the
I
apple
was
would be.
looking at those as you do though. Like I kind of love them.
And then the flip side of the card, like you really could sort of do like quite a cheesy thing, but kind of like a phone interface, like the text could be like you've got a text and you could have these little sort of squoval icons and buttons. So that I think does I especially like this because
I only just properly read your little speech bubble.
Avant. So yeah, I also think because the deck itself comes like the game itself is like a 3 decks, we think, kind of like a self deck, a vampire deck, and an event deck. So it could all just come in kind of a card deck sized box. At least the front dimension of it would be that.
Yeah.
So you could make it sort of look like a phone from the outside as well, or you could make it look like a fancy phone box, like
oh yeah,
when you get your new smartphone and it comes in like a really nice kind of super simple over-designed box.
Yeah.
Oh, but then it's also a coffin.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, so we just need a name.
Yeah, we do.
Oh no, I'm rubbish at names, sort of stuff.
I mean,
it might have to be on you guys.
Okay, Miriam, it's time to work our magic. I don't think we can do I want to suck your blood. That's just it's too much. But I don't hate the idea of it being, that kind of like 2010, like what people call in their apps and their products then. People love to do like camel words. They love to do like
the like your tumblers, your
lose a vowel,
your flickers,
so it'd be like
sucker.
I don't hate it, but I don't think it's what we're gonna land on.
Oh no, I do like that though. That is good.
It's not, unfortunately, these are the kind of names that aren't going to sound as good said out loud on the pod as they are going to look on the box.
Because yes, exactly. I mean, we have the option to just call it Digital Vampire, which I do not hate, but I think we could do better.
Yeah.
I kind of like that both words have 7 letters. Like I feel like you could do something with that. Don't ask me what.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of like the like the digital being the very stereotypical font for that sort of thing. Very blocky, and then having like the vampire being ridiculously sort of gothic and gory, like blood trickling down and whatever sort of thing. Like I like the idea that could be a thing.
Could we have something with veins or
I'm desperately trying to think of something to do with like battery drain.
I quite like battery drain. I don't I quite like that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of absolutely love that digital vampire logo you just knocked up there. That is exactly what was in my brain.
She's got the skills.
Okay, what is the sort of the big ideas? This is about how your phone sucks your life away. This is about like it's about energy. It's about like
I mean, the problem is like so many like like memes and stuff like that to do with people just walking around with their head in the phone. All ties them to blooming zombies.
Yeah, it's true. And you know what? I think that's what I like about this is that I kind of hate those memes because it sort of puts it on people like it's their fault that they're addicted
Yeah,
to a consumer product that has been calculated and designed by hundreds of thousands of people to be as addictive as humanly possible. At
yeah,
least this puts the onus on the right person.
yeah.
Like
And that goddamn vampire.
on the vampire that all of us have been tricked into carrying around with us all the time.
I'm now also staring at my phone like it's gonna bite me.
Is it like, I don't know, pocket vampires kind of weak? For me, I think it's between digital vampire and battery drain. And I think I like both of them. And I think you could style them both in that similar way.
Yeah.
I think I like Digital Vampire better out of the two of them. I have a feeling this is one of those where after the episode, one of us is going to come up with the real
Oh, absolutely.
zinger of a title. But
yeah.
I
mean, I'm not gonna lie. If I saw a box that was a digital vampire on it, it would intrigue me. Maybe I am that simple, but that would 100% work on me.
No, I'm perfectly happy with settling on digital vampire. I think there's something like considering that we sort of I think set out to do something relatively elegant. I think there's nothing wrong with keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Okay. So Miriam, what's left on the clock?
We got 6 minutes.
Do you want to try and do a recap of sorts?
So the game that we've conceived today is called Digital Vampire. It is a simple card-based solo survival game where you need to manage your resources as you try to navigate your way out of your sort of dystopian existence. You will rely on your phone in order to complete some tasks, but relying on your phone too much allows the digital vampire who's following you and trying to drain your life force to gain more of a hold on you. So every turn you are going to be faced with an event. You will have to complete a certain number of successful coin flips in order to gain the benefit of completing an event. And by failing an event, you give the vampire the chance to advance towards its goal of killing you or making you its vampire spawn slave in your digital existence.
All right. This ended up, see, this is what I meant when I said that it never ends up being what you think.
Nope, not even remotely.
I don't think any of us imagined that this would be the direction that our survival game took. But I really like it when two ideas kind of get mashed up and you make something far stranger than just a vampire survival game or a sort of cyberpunk digital survival game. Like, I feel like that is a space where we generally have a good time doing the weirder thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's been a real pleasure to have you on, Mark. What a treat. You got anything to plug?
Oh, just Thirsty Meeples, of course, the best board game cafe there is.
It's true. If you are based in the Oxford region, you really can't do better.
It was great to have you on, Mark. Thank you for joining us. I don't know if you have been prepared for the way that we finish every episode.
Oh yeah, I guess if no one's told you that this is how we finish the episode, then you'll just have to find out firsthand. So thank you to our listener. We love you, listener. Thank you for listening. And until next time, caw.
No, I was not prepared for that.